This episode of Dispatches from Planet Albany is brought to you with support by New York State United Teachers, which represents more than 600,000 educators and school-related professionals in New York. Dispatches is also supported by the public affairs firm O'Donnell and Associates. For more information, check out o'donnellsolutions.com.
No, they had horses too. I neglected to say that there was a whole parade of horses, circus animals, elephants. It was great. I love horses. I've always loved horses since I was a little girl. I've also declared war on potholes. So here's the first shot across the bow.
Well, as you know, with Planet Albany, there's always something that makes the planet turn.
And it's this amazing view of D.C., and Eddie Vedder comes out. And he goes, "You have a cigarette?" And I've never smoked in my life, but if I had, I wish that was the moment.
And this strategy takes us from potholes to knotholes.
I would like to say it was a pleasure, Mr. Kim. But I'm on the road.
I'm David Lombardo, and this is Dispatches from Planet Albany, a podcast about power and politics in New York. And in this episode, we're exploring the current and future power of Congressman Pat Ryan, a veteran and former county executive who's now running for his third full term in the House, but is also considered a potential heavyweight among New York Democrats, given his profile and some savvy campaign choices in recent years. The Ulster County Democrat was the subject of a political profile in August by reporter Jason Bieferman, who joins us now to discuss his story, Pat Ryan's future, and the broader landscape of Democrats who might have statewide ambitions. Thanks for making the time, Jason.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, right now, Pat Ryan is probably not the most powerful or high-profile Democrat in New York. So what prompted the deep dive you did for the Politico magazine this summer?
I think Pat Ryan, for the real, political insiders and observers, has been someone that it's clear as he says, he wants to do more. And he has this charisma, this way of connecting with voters that I think he would even say himself sets him apart from other more maybe stodgy politicians. He's also relatively young, so he's definitely worth some scrutiny as a New York political player.
Well, he said he wants to do more. What does that potentially look like? Because there's only so far you can go after being a member of Congress.
Well, it's true, but, someone I talked to said maybe a cabinet position. So we could be thinking, I think everyone thinks New York, Senate is where he probably has his eye on. But we can't count out that he has real relationships with Pete Buttigieg and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And so if either of them were elected to the White House, maybe he doesn't run for Senate, but maybe he ends up in one of their administrations. But the piece talked about this interesting dynamic where AOC is like a key ally of his. But if she runs for Senate, that kind of potentially could block off his path to run for Senate.
Well, what is it about Pat Ryan that makes him an attractive politician outside of the 18th congressional district in the Hudson Valley? I mean, is it just his veteran profile, the fact that he's young and handsome and seems to be able to thread this needle with what he's described as patriotic populism?
It's very interesting because I think his brand of politics is very effective, or would be even more effective 4 years ago. But now that we have the rise of the DSA, Zoran Mamdani, it's this interesting question of someone who's billing himself as, I bring Republicans and Democrats together, because you have to remember he outperformed Kamala Harris in his purple district. He's really popular in this district, despite the fact that it used to be considered a battleground seat. But you have to remember that to win statewide in this blue state, maybe the Democratic Party in a primary will say, we don't want someone who can tout their bipartisanship. We want someone who's more close to the DSA. But I think he feels like my ability to bring people together, my ability to take Democrats and Republicans, urban or semi-urban and rural, that makes him a formidable force and candidate.
Well, has he been tested on any of the issues that historically dog Democratic candidates? Because it's one thing to go after utilities and talk about breaking up big businesses, but it's another thing to weigh in on social issues like transgender rights or immigrant rights, or maybe to get deeper in the weeds on Israel's presence in Gaza. I know he took one hard vote and talked about AIPAC in a tweet thread, but has he been really tested on some of these issues that are problematic for Democratic candidates? Because it seems like he's been ducking these issues or just has been fortunate to avoid getting mired in them.
It's probably intentional that way.
Oh, sure.
Like he can really get down on the issues, but then it's like these more like intellectual debates that more people care about. I mean, it's not just intellectual, but like Israel-Palestine, right? He's like super pro-Israel, and then all of a sudden the wind changes, and then he's like tweeting at AIPAC, please don't endorse me. I don't want your money. I don't want your endorsement. And it's a very convenient time for him to change that position. So it's like, yeah, the issues that he hasn't waded into, we both agree that's intentional, but he can't outrun them in a primary. And I think we saw that with the Israel issue. He's like probably thought to himself, geez, I probably need to switch my position on this. And now we're seeing the result of it. It's like two different Pat Ryans on Israel.
You mentioned in your story the 2024 Twitter post-mortem he did on the elections, which kind of laid out a case what went wrong nationally for Democrats, and he also sort of took his own victory lap. Did anything stand out to you from that analysis, or was it just like every other locally popular Democrat, often white guys in the vein of a James Skoufis or Pat Ryan, who outperformed a woman of color in a kind of impossible political situation that year? I mean, did he seem to offer any sort of groundbreaking analysis to you, or was it the case of, yes, know your voters, probably don't tie an anchor around your feet that is Joe Biden in 2024, or, you know, try to win voters as the first woman of color on the top of a ticket?
Well, say what you will about Pat Ryan, but he has been very prescient. You know, he was, sure, it's easy to call on Joe Biden to step down after half your party has done it already, but he was one of the first, I believe the eighth Democrat in Congress to call on him to step down. He also like told Biden, you need to secure the border. So I feel like he does have this sense where this is going to blow up in the future, and I'm going to make a big statement on it now, and it worked to his credit. And in that thread, one thing that he did was he talked about affordability. And if you remember, like everyone started talking about affordability once Zoran was on the rise and things like that. But this was in November 2024. So he was kind of early on this idea of like affordability. And then Mikey Sherrill, Zoran, Abigail Spanberger, like they made everyone start talking about affordability. So I think he is prescient. The other thing about that thread, though, is he was like, I fought against the billionaires and, you know, I made people understand who's wrong. And then when I talked to him in person, I said, so I think in that thread, you kind of staked out this anti-billionaire brand. And he interrupted me and he said, wait a second, I think I said greedy billionaires. It's very important that we say that there are patriotic, you know, patriotic, wonderful, wealthy people. And so he wanted to interrupt me and say, actually, it's greedy billionaires that I oppose. Of course, in the post, he didn't make that distinction, but it's very interesting how he's, again, like, just like we talked on Israel, he's trying to thread this needle. It's like, I don't want to alienate anyone, but I want my star to rise.
Do you have a sense of why he doesn't really go viral on social media the way Zoran Mamdani does or a James Tallarico? Do you think that's by design, or do you think that's a product of just his brand, which maybe isn't that exciting, or maybe just lacks the team behind the scenes to make the viral sensations?
His threads actually, they do go viral. Like the one we talked about has millions of views. Other threads that he's written have gotten millions of views, but like, no, he doesn't have Melted Solids, you know, the video team that did Zoran Mamdani's stuff. But when he did a town hall with AOC, which I talked about, where they went up to Glens Falls and like spoke to everybody. And, that had a lot of views because she has a lot of viewers. But yeah, I think he would do well to hire Melted Solids or someone like that and, put some cool sepia filter on him, like walking around Kingston.
Well, you are the de facto youth correspondent for this episode, Jason. So we'll have to just assume that you are in touch with the kids and that's the right way to go here.
Yeah, that's what they told me at the meeting.
Well, I'm thinking about a statewide campaign, whether it's for U.S. Senate in 2028 or governor in 2030. How do you think he is with the constituencies that matter in a statewide Democratic primary, like organized labor, Democrats of color, and the more progressive wing of the party, whether that's DSA or just the people who make up sort of the traditional far left? Does he seem to have an in with any of these constituencies?
So a big part of your question also that I think we have to name is that he's not from New York City. And so in order to win statewide, the conventional wisdom is you need a huge base in the New York City area because that's where the population is.
Sure.
He told me, I don't need that. I never listen to the political pundits and they're never right, something like that. But to your point, his relationship with the DSA, I think AOC, it's a mutually beneficial relationship that they have. Like I said, they toured the state. They held events together. Maybe he helps her look a little bit more moderate, and maybe she helps him build that bridge with the left of the Democratic Party. But in his district, I don't think the DSA has liked him at all, especially on the issue of Israel. They protested his office. Like there's this big altercation outside his office a couple of years ago because he wouldn't call for a ceasefire in the Israel-Palestine thing, or an immediate ceasefire. And I think also the reaction to my story, like people, they get upset when you say it's the greedy billionaires we need to come after instead of saying, I hate billionaires. So I think the DSA can be tough. And yeah, I think we have yet to see he has support from labor, but I'm not sure if he has the same connections that someone based in New York City with all the unions we have here has.
Yeah, somebody made, I think it was Chantel Plummer, made the distinction when we were talking about who might be the future Senate Labor Committee chair, that it's different to have ties with upstate organized labor versus downstate organized labor, that it's a different animal, different concerns, different needs. And like you said, that is probably a bigger issue, the downstate needs in a statewide campaign. So I have to imagine he's going to be looking to build those relationships if he is looking to do more.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to track his movements. Maybe we're going to see him all of a sudden in Brooklyn every other week.
Because he likes to hang out with hipsters like yourself, or because there's...
I'm not a hipster. No? Because he wants to...
All sepia tuned to the contrary?
Well, actually, he invited Brad Lander. So this is very interesting. Pat Ryan has a whole political PAC operation called Patriot PAC. So he's endorsing local candidates around New York State. We're talking like town supervisor or like water authority or like town council, things like that. Mm-hmm. But he's endorsed like almost 100 candidates up and down the state for the most recent election we had. And obviously that's very key because now if he runs for state office, he has all these people around the state, like, the local, like, Cheektowaga, whatever, can come out and say, like, oh, I love Pat Ryan, like, everyone should vote for him.
And the 10 votes that will deliver from the Cheektowaga Democrats.
10 times 10 is 100.
Sure.
So then what's interesting is he also has a federal PAC where he's been endorsing all across the country, but also in New York, and he backed Dan Goldman over Brad Lander. And I think a lot of people, or he also backed like Reynoso over Claire Valdez. And it's interesting because he's like, I'm the populist candidate. But I think a lot of people feel like Claire Valdez or Daria Lisa was more, quote unquote, populist rather than like establishment. Anyway, so he backed Dan Goldman, and then Dan Goldman lost. And then 2 weeks later, he invited Brad Lander up on stage with him for his campaign kickoff rally in the Hudson Valley. So he's very intentional about it. And I'm sure he wants to appear with Brad Lander in Brooklyn ASAP. So he's definitely savvy like that, and that's why I say we'll see him in Brooklyn, I'm sure.
Well, we were talking earlier about his ambitions through the context of federal government, whether that's the cabinet, whether that's the U.S. Senate seat that might be up for grabs in New York in 2028. But what about in New York State politics and state government? Is there any talk about him as a possible successor to Kathy Hochul as governor in 2030?
When I talk to people, it's not as much what the first thing on their mind is, but I think like everyone recognizes he could be a good candidate. The trouble is, it's like, will Kathy run again? But Hochul and Ryan also, to his credit, like he has great relationships around the state. Hochul also showed up to his campaign kickoff rally. I don't know what Hochul's calculation is, but I have to think that she wouldn't see him as a threat, or maybe that's intentional. I'm gonna like build a great relationship with him so he doesn't challenge me one day. Like he said, I want to do more. I have I have ambitions for higher office. I just, I'm not going to say what it is. So I'm sure if someone said, can you be governor tomorrow? He'd say yes.
It is interesting how you have these dominoes that could fall if someone like Governor Kathy Hochul was to prematurely announce, I'm not running in 2030, or U.S. Senator Chuck Schumer announces, I'm not running in 2028. Although I think if either of those things were to happen, it would be at the last possible second to avoid being treated like a lame duck. Is it your sense that he would wait to jump in until it was clear, or does he seem like the type of Democratic official who would take on the establishment, or take on an incumbent more specifically?
I think Pat Ryan probably feels like he has great relationships on the federal level, like fellow members of Congress who can rally for him. Like I said, AOC is kind of the bigger star in all of this. Maybe AOC will run for governor.
Well,
I don't know.
Do you think that? I mean, it seems like it's president or bust.
I think she could run for Senate.
Why would she want to be in the Senate?
You don't have to choose president now. You could be a senator first.
She is a rock star in the House of Representatives. Why would she want to join the most boring institution this country has to offer, where she could just be like completely stagnant in any sort of policy victories? I mean, in the House, if you take a one-seat majority in the House, you're running shit. You're passing bills. You could have 59 seats in the U.S. Senate, and you're still not doing things because you can't stop a filibuster.
Well,
president or bust.
It's a nice gig, Senate.
I don't even get paid more. You get paid this six-year term.
Terms. Yeah, you're a big voice,
and you get to serve till you're 85.
The other thing we have to think about is Gillibrand 2 years later is up for re-election as well. So maybe Pat Ryan doesn't run for Senate in 2028, but maybe he runs in 2030.
Yeah, I mean, is there talk about Gillibrand being more ripe for primaries than Schumer?
I think if we look at the polling, I don't think her numbers are as fantastic as they used to be. And
she doesn't have New York City support the way Chuck Schumer has built up ties over a multi-decade career.
Yeah, and I think this is more like the real people that are paying attention. But she really angered people when she went on Brian Lehrer and spoke like so harshly about Zoran Mamdani and like Israel-Palestine issues. And I don't think people forgot that. And I think in the same way a lot of the DSA like vilifies Chuck Schumer, I think they view Kirsten Gillibrand right behind him.
Well, thinking about other potential names that might have statewide ambitions, I want to throw a handful at you that came to my mind, and I'm not saying all of them deserve the same level of consideration, but they are New York City Mayor Zoran Mamdani, who in the last Siena poll has a 47% favorable rating from voters statewide, which I think is pretty impressive given the media narrative around him. You've got Congressman Richie Torres, who played footsie with a run for governor before ultimately abandoning ship. And then you've got Erie County executive Mark Poloncarz, who fancies himself as Pete Buttigieg 2.0, albeit without the charm and charisma. But is there anybody else that I'm missing that you think people should be talking about, or is it kind of a short bench for the Democrats at this point when it comes to things like 2030 conversations?
I don't have the inside track on what Jumaane Williams wants to do, but I think he could always run again.
Third time's the charm for Jumaane Williams?
Letitia James, if Hochul doesn't run again, I think she'd be like well positioned to run for governor.
And I don't imagine there's a world in which you envision Letitia James primarying the governor, right?
I don't think so, no.
We've seen that movie.
Maybe you do.
No, not at all. No. there was a brief, footsie with it, and there was a no thank you.
Yeah. Michael Asher is an ambitious guy.
Oh, see, I see Michael Asher as being a lifer in Congress now. I see him envisioning himself leaving probably the same time Jerry left, in his 80s.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm just thinking about the delegation.
Yeah, I looked at the delegation before we chatted, and it's not a, let's say, murderer's row of potential Democratic powerhouses. Mm-hmm. Somebody like Hakeem Jeffries, I thought, would have been a good choice for like New York City mayor or governor before becoming in line to be the next speaker. But I guess the only other person that stands out to me, and this is really just because of where she's from, is Grace Meng, because of Queens and how big a role it can play in the Democratic Party, and how she, I think, has a reputation of being sort of moderate, and maybe there's going to be a conversation in 2030 about, hey, let's not go with a white person this go around, or this is a rising part of the electorate, the Asian American Democrats. But I also don't really see her as someone who's been positioning herself for something like that in recent years.
I think Grace Meng is actually going to have a competitive primary in 2028.
Mm-hmm. From her far left?
Yeah, we saw Chuck Park, who ran against her. It wasn't neck and neck, but he had a respectable showing, and he didn't have the backing of the DSA. And I think after our most recent election, the DSA looked at what happened, like in the assembly, all these races that they did a clean sweep, and they're like, wow, maybe we can even go for Grace Meng's seat.
That Jordan Wright erasure will not stand, Jason. Clean sweep.
I wrote about that.
Clean sweep.
Almost clean sweep. Thank you. So one big name we're forgetting, of course, is Dan Goldman.
Ignoring, tomato.
Or forgetting. But I mean, people think City and State thinks he's going to run for Attorney General, maybe. So he has money. He's not very popular on the far left, but maybe the suburbanites.
My parents like him.
Yeah, there you go.
So that's 2 votes.
Let's say Letitia James does something else. No one else runs for Attorney General. Like it's him versus someone.
Eric Gonzalez.
Yeah.
I think that's the narrative, is the Brooklyn County DA would like to be Attorney General, and then Zellner Myrie can become Brooklyn County DA. But I also wonder whether the fact that there is no powerhouse potential here, that it does create an opening for someone who is ambitious and makes a first move. This idea of that first mover advantage, that if you are able to rally a little bit of support, and maybe you have some sort of fiefdom, whether it is Pat Ryan in Hudson Valley, whether it's somebody else who we haven't talked about who might have a strong political base, simply by getting out there first, they can create some sort of air of inevitability around whatever their future is, and that might scare away people, and you kind of become the presumptive next candidate. So that's one thing I think about. But then there's also the potential for a very crowded field of candidates, and you don't need to be someone who's got the state wired from Montauk to Buffalo. You just need to have your part of the electorate sewn up.
Viral on TikTok.
Yeah, or come on Dispatches. You need the Dispatches boost. That would be my message to everyone.
Did Mom Donnie go on? Mom Donnie went on your show, right?
Well, we used to have him on when he was a assembly member. One of our last conversations was him talking about his affinity for Stranger Things. We did an entire episode about Stranger Things.
There we go.
That's in the Capitol Press Room archives, or wherever you download your favorite podcast.
You have to go viral on social media, a la Melted Solids, and you also have to go on Capitol Press Room and talk about your favorite show on Netflix. there's another seat that we didn't even discuss, whether or not, maybe DiNapoli runs again once more, but it's hard to see him run after that.
But you mean 2034 we're talking about?
You don't think he's going to run for re-election? I think he has
I don't know.
more.
There's this case to be made that he actually needs to win again in 2030 to become the longest-serving state comptroller. He's short by like a few days if he doesn't run again in 2030. So how important is that to him? He'll be 76 in 2030, which I know because he's the same age as my parents, and my parents are both retiring at age 72. So, but what else is going on that he would want to do in his life? Yeah, the 2034 race, I think we still have some time to talk about. Maybe that's where Pat Ryan takes his lead. Well, Jason, thank you so much for making the time. Unfortunately, we got to leave it there. We've been speaking with Jason Bieferman. He's a reporter with Politico New York. Jason, thank you so much for making the time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me. It was fun.
Well, I'm going to take just a few questions because I cannot wait to get out and see the great New York State Fair.